Genesis 16 explained verses 1 through 16. And let's listen.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Be Like Christ for our Bible study through each chapter of the Bible. We are in Genesis chapter 16 today. Free PDF outline on our website at tobelikechrist.com. Let's jump in. When did the events of Genesis chapter 16 take place? This would have been between the 75th birthday and the 100th birthday of our main character, Abram, who we'll talk about in a second. So as far as the years on our timeline, this is approximately 1921 BC to 1896 BC, somewhere in between there. In terms of our main characters, we've got Abram, better known as Abraham. He was a man who God made some promises to. The first promise was that God was going to give his descendants the land of Canaan as an inheritance. The second one was that he was going to give Abram a lot of children. And then the third one was that God was going to bless all the people of the earth through Abraham and his family line. Now, our second main character is Sarai. This is Abram's wife. And interestingly, Sarai was barren. She couldn't have any children. So there's a problem here. How's God going to make Sarai into a great nation, or Abram into a great nation if Sarai can't have any children? Then our third main character, who comes about as a result of this dilemma, is Hagar. Hagar was an Egyptian servant of Sarai's, and Sarai gave Hagar to Abraham so that Abraham could have children with her, since Sarai couldn't. Where did chapter 16 take place? The key location in Genesis 16 is a spring of water known as Beer Lahai Roi. Now, the exact location of this spring is unknown, but most historians think that it's located somewhere within the borders of the black box, which you can see on the map on the screen if you're on YouTube, or the PDF if you download that. And so now for our outline, our first section, verses 1 through 6, we have Abram, Sarai, and Hagar, and we'll talk about the situation between all three of them. So Sarai, Abram's wife, had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. We already mentioned that. Sarai was unable to have children because she was barren, and so she told Abram to take Hagar as a wife and to try to conceive children with her. Now, Hagar was actually successful conceiving a child with Abram, and from that time on, the text says that she began to look down on Sarai, maybe because she was unable to conceive and Hagar had been successful. But she began to look down on Sarai, and Sarai, quote, dealt harshly with her, which resulted in Hagar running away from Abram's house. In our second section, verses 7 through 16, the angel of the Lord makes Hagar a promise. So after Hagar ran away, she was in the wilderness, and the angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water and asked her where she was going. And she said, well, I'm running away from Sarai, my mistress. And the angel told her to go back to Sarai, go back to Abram's house, and he promised her that she was going to have a son, and that God was going to make that son and his descendants into a large nation, and God was going to bless him. Hagar was instructed to name her son Ishmael, and the angel foretold that Ishmael would be, quote, a wild donkey of a man, his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. And so with that promise, Hagar blessed the Lord and called him, quote, the God of seeing, because he looked after her during her time of trouble in the wilderness. And the spring of water where the angel of the Lord spoke to Hagar became known as Beer Lahai Roi. And Abram was 86 years old when Ishmael was born. And so that is Genesis chapter 16. Now, for an application before we finish for today. You can't rush God's plan. In Genesis chapter 12, which felt like a long time ago, and it was for Abram and Sarai, God had promised to make Abraham into a great nation. But as Sarai and Abram grew older, as they got upwards towards 90, towards 100, the chances of naturally conceiving children became slimmer and slimmer. Rather than trusting God's promises, Sarai decided she was going to take matters into her own hands and give Hagar to Abraham as a way to kind of solve this problem of Abraham not having any children. In the upcoming chapters, we're going to find out that Sarai's solution didn't actually solve the problem. In fact, it caused a lot of hardship in Abraham's household because of Sarai's impatience. It's always better to trust God patiently than to try to take matters into our own hands in an attempt to solve things more quickly. God will fulfill his promises. There's no doubt about that. And stories like this in the Bible teach us that in the modern day. It may feel like God is slow in fulfilling his promises and doing what he says he's going to do in his word, but he will get around to it when he's ready, and you can trust that whenever he's ready is the best time for that promise to be fulfilled.
We must trust God's timing. So that was Genesis chapter 16, verses 1 through 16.